Hey, this is Zero to Pass coming at you with a post playtesting discussion on Chaos Breaker Dragon. So I posted a few of our matches that we did yesterday. We played probably about 4 to 5 straight hours of playtesting, where I was just using Chaos Breaker against Bermuda Plon and also against Gurgwit. And there were some things that became pretty obvious, and I just wanted to go over that. There's some things that are still being worked out, but yeah, let's get started. So 4 Chaos Breaker, 4 Zirconium, and 4 of Craving Claw, absolutely. You need those cards. You need 4 of White Dwarf because you're going to get your Chaos Breaker. I did pretty well. I never G-assisted. One of the things I did do with my trigger lineup is I went to 6 and 6. So I took out a draw PG and went up on the triggers through one of the Sentinel triggers for the critical. So didn't matter. I think it gave a little bit more pressure, and you do want the criticals. Zirconium definitely is giving Chaos Breaker the critical pressure, so that does help. The thing you really want, though, as well, is just draw power. This deck needs to draw into pieces. Surprisingly, and I guess after the fact, hindsight, it's not so surprising that Claw is actually extremely important because it allows you to lock on your turn and then unlock to lock and, in effect, getting markers off your opponent's field. And this was really, really crucial. If you want to tear a bunch of Excel off of Gurgwit, you're going to want to lock, then you're going to want to unlock and start ripping those Excel markers from them. One of the MVPs is definitely Nordstrom Dragon. This guy really put it into work. You have to make sure your opponent has a grade 2 or higher. I caught myself at one point there. Really, really good card. Lots of value. Yeah, you're going to just pitch it, but you're getting counter charge and you're binding one of your opponent's rear guards. The one thing with Gurgwit that you'll find is they tend to empty their board. Similar vein to Grand Blue and Pale Moon. So it could get kind of annoying, but this card definitely did its work, and so I definitely recommend running this at least 3. And I was running 3 most of the night. I think I had one game at the very beginning. I ran 4, and I said no, I don't need it. It was just flooding my hand, so I ran 3. Another card, unfortunately, you didn't get to see the video of this. There was a game at the very end of when we were playing our just straight rounds of Chaos versus Bermuda and then versus Gurgwit, where if I had actually, instead of using Binodal to force my opponent to guard with 2 cards, if I'd actually used that counterblast that I got off him to actually lock one of his Excel marker rear guards, it was very high probability that I was going to win that game. So counterblast management is really important, and I do want to go over, which is why I recommend running him, I do want to go over cards that we were testing and then cards that I would think about testing perhaps this next weekend. So definitely MVP in a number of ways, but just 3. Her, Taurus, I really like her. She's really good if you're able to Chaos Breaker and then Zirconium on the same turn, because then your opponent has 2 locked cards. Or you use Zirconium or Chaos Breaker, use this, and then the next turn follow that up to locking another card. Because you got to have 2 locked and or bound cards. So you could have 1 bound from him maybe, and then 1 locked. So this is actually a really versatile card in that regard. It does require some setup. I do like her. She's kind of on the verge of being removed from the deck. Maybe not fully, but we'll get to that. There are things that this deck really, really wants to do that may not keep her around. So again, I went down on my number of draw triggers. I went down to just 3 of Nordstrom. I had this in the one match I think you see. I never played him. I was sitting there taking way too much time. Judge, patient, or not patient, sorry. Wow, I'm really tired. Judge, player, stalling. And so, yeah, I don't think you need this. I don't think you need anything like this. We do have a finisher. It's called Chaos Breaker with a crit. So, yeah, there's that. So that was one of the cards that just didn't make the cut. I had him in early. He went. Did not need this at all. It's not good in premium, and I'm starting to think it's just not great here either. The thing is, this card, it's really good if your opponent's not paying attention, but who's not going to pay attention? And late game, this is really bad. It's not good. It's not good. You have White Dwarf to search for your card, and you're going to do that. So now this guy, I do like him, and I saw that there were some other players playing with this out there on the web. There are a few matches up there now already, and they were using it with this. It's really good late game to use this. It's not a finisher, but it sets it up so that you can try to finish your opponent off if they're at 4 to 5 damage. You're going to put this behind him. The only benefit that this has in that play, where it's your final turn that you're pushing, is if you don't get through the final turn. That's the only benefit of this card. Okay? So, and that's not bad. You're being proactive in terms of, well, if I don't win, at least I get 2 more cards in hand. There's that. Early on, your opponent's just going to take damage. This is not going to proc. It's just not. So I'm even more on the fence about trying this card out again. It is good. Don't get me wrong. It works really well with this guy. I might end up eating my words later on. But there's one thing about this card that makes it really good. It's a cantrip. One of the problems with this deck is it needs Counterblast. I have an answer for this. One of the problems with this deck is it needs Soul Blast. My Hunter-Off cats, my English versions, are on the way from Singapore, because we're going to get to that here in a bit too with other cards. The deck needs Soul. It really, really needs Soul. People are complaining about it from what I heard. I don't think it needs to be something that's complained about, because we actually have solutions to this. And that cat is one of them, and we'll get to it. But the good thing about this card is it replaces itself. You need to dig. You need to dig for pieces. And one of the pieces you really need to dig for is Claw. That card is phenomenal. I'm hoping in future sets we get at least one more unlocker where we can unlock our opponent's card. It's just really, really good. And it is an MVP of sorts, because it accelerates your stealing of the markers, as I was explaining. So this card, it's Counterblast, Soul Blast heavy. It does draw a card though, and it does force a double guard, and that's actually not bad. It's really good. Unfortunately, it's not like Cannon, where if Cannon's on the rear guard, or not rear guard, excuse me, Cannon's on the Vanguard, it's for all attacks. But this one draws a card, so there is that. Really good card. Definitely in contention for sticking around, as all these cards are here. Getting to Soul Charge. So there's him. Now, I really, really like this card, but I went back and watched the Gurgawet video, or the Gurgawet match that we have up there, that is going to be posted right before this one. You should be able to see it. Even at the end of the game, the last 2 turns, I don't think there were any targets grade 2 or higher to give me the soul that I want. I love this card. It's really good early on to just kind of start, taking pieces off the table. But it's one of those cards that may make it into here in terms of sticking around. However, again, yeah, we'll see. There's definitely gonna be certain matches where you're gonna get this off easy, real easy. But there's gonna be quite a few matches where you won't. Her, unfortunately, she doesn't say rear guard circle, So this doesn't work for locked cards. If it did, it would be awesome. I did have a game that wasn't recorded, but I did have a game where I had spot bound a card. I think it might have been with him. And then the next turn, I just used her to counterblast. Couldn't bind to, so then I countercharge and soul charge. So it does give you soul. These two cards can give you soul. This requires quite a bit of setup. And I know my initial video that just a day or two ago, I talk about, Chaos Breaker. I really, really like this card. I think we should watch for this card to see what happens. It requires a bit of setup. Now, with that said, he does bind. And so this can help fuel this card. However, again, is it enough to warrant its play? Maybe. I still think it could be at 3, especially since we have this. If this didn't bind, then no, but it does bind. And if we put him in with her, back in, because I did try this, it wasn't working out for me, I think because of the deck I was playing against. Against Bermuda, this is going to be a bit better, but I was finding myself able to lock and control that way. So still a really good suite. This card kind of goes along with it. It just gives you more bind. The problem with it is that unlike his brother, he doesn't draw. If this drew a card into your hand, that would be amazing, but it doesn't. So he really hasn't made the cut, unfortunately. So for that card. So in terms of a bind suite, excuse me, he'd have this here, okay? Now in terms of soul charge, situational soul charging, also situational soul charging. I did have her in, I think it was my first game. I did use her, but then I ended up taking her out because I put in him or some other grade 1 that I might have been trying, like this guy here. It is situational. It's not too hard to get off, but Arnav's cat, when you lock a card, you're going to be able to put that cat in the same column. Now, if you're playing against Excel, you're not going to be able to do it so easy. But I believe it is in the, if it's in the same column. So if I'm not mistaken on the wording, I don't have my tablet down here right now. But anyways, the cat's going to be able to go in to the soul pretty easily, give you +10. The better thing about her is you're going to be able to attack and get the 8K bonus, or 8K boost, excuse me. And then if they don't guard, then it goes into the soul, and then you get 10. So this effectively gets you 8 more K on attack. So which is arguably, or which is why this is arguably more pressuring in that regard. So she's still here as a consideration, and I do like this card. So I wouldn't counter out. The other card that I've seen people playing with is him. If your opponent has 2 or less rear guards, it works really great against Gurgwit, right? Put this unit in your soul, 3 of your units get 4K. That's pretty easy to do. It's going to put your 20K column up to a 24. So now it's over a magic number, 23 or 22, depending on what you're playing against. It's not bad. Chaos Breaker is going to go from 23 to 27. So instead of, I guess 23 over 22, 27, he doesn't really change much there. But into soul, give you force bonuses all around. It's not bad. The problem is it's not going to work against a deck that swarms you and keeps board presence. So this card is, I'm maybe, maybe. So these cards help with soul, okay? These were just all around. These two were pretty good. She was decent. Cantrip ability, able to cycle, which is why I really like this card. This was somewhat problematic just because if your opponent knows how to guard, is able to guard appropriately, most of the time they're going to be able to get around that. We need soul. That's what this package is about here, or pieces of it. The last thing we need to talk about is drawing into pieces. And so I would say that if I just had a little bit more draw power, and it's kind of crazy because you got Chaos Breaker, right? But your soul's limited too. So get that fixed here. You still want to be able to unlock quickly. And so we want to be able to dig for Claw. We definitely want to be able to dig for him and other pieces too. So we want more draw power. So some of the cards to think about are, for example, her. The way she works is you're going to be able to, when you attack or boost against, this is really, really good, just like Claw, he does that too. Let's see here. Where's he at? Yeah, Craving Claw, Vanguard, Rearguard. It's just so good, so good. You ride on that first, your opponent's like, yeah, okay, and then you go search for Chaos Breaker. It's wonderful. But her, if it boosts or the attack that it made hits a Vanguard, you put a card from your hand, so you're going to be able to select what it is. If it has an on-placement skill, you don't want to do that typically. But if it was something like, say, her, or if it was maybe Chaos Breaker, there are a few cards. So this card's going to be really restricted in what you're going to want to put in play, unless you, for example, have duplicates. If you were playing him, you could definitely do that. This isn't on place. If you were playing with this, you could definitely put her down. You were playing with this, you could definitely put this down, maybe in the back row to save it for the next turn. So there are some things, there are some targets in here for this. So that's one card that I would consider. I'd mentioned this. Really good in Messiah. Deleters can use this as well. Anything, as I was saying before, could really use that. So now we start getting into some other cards that I had to dig out of my binder. Dustblade. So Dustblade is a on hit, so when boosting. So when attack it boosted, hits Vanguard, counterblast 1, choose one of your opponent's rear guards, bind it face down. If your Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, draw a card. So it's going to allow you to spot remove card off the table. It's going to allow you to draw a card, and the only requirements are that attack hits, and you're sitting on Chaos Breaker, basically. You're sitting on your grade 3. So for him, I'd probably run just maybe 2-3 copies, because this is more mid to late game, more mid-range to late game grindy ability, because you have to be on grade 3. So he's definitely an option. I like this option better than the next one. So Vect, outer white Vect, or white outer Vect. Rearguard, auto, at the end of a battle that it attacked your Vanguard. If your opponent did not call trigger unit that battle, counterblast 1. You draw a card. That's the first thing you do. Choose one of your opponent's grade 2 or greater rearguards and bind it face down. So this is going after grade 2s as well. You may have already locked it. Your opponent may have already popped those back to hand. They're going to see a bit through that. So he's a card that I really would not consider in the end. But it's an option, and if you may want to consider it. Now for a few other cards. Opener of Dark Gates. Opener of Dark Gates has the same problem as he does. Rearguard, when placed, if your opponent has 2 or less rearguards, Soul Blast 1. Look at 2 cards from the top of your deck. Call up to one card with a grade less than or equal to the opponent's Vanguard from among them to rearguard circle, and put the remaining cards on the bottom of the deck. So we do have a shuffler in the deck. We do have White Dwarf, so that's not going to be too much of a problem putting the card on the bottom. If it was something that you wanted, if you actually pulled 2 cards and you're like, man, I wish I could have both these. It does Soul Blast. It's really good early on. It's going to allow for on-place effects because you are calling it. So it's not face down. So this is another card that would be pretty good. This card's going to be limited because of what you put down. If it's an on-place effect, you just nullified it. Dustblade requires hit. This requires hit too. Dustblade just straight up draws and binds. This is actually a very offensive card. This card is limited if your opponent, your opponent has to have 2 or less rearguards, just like him. So, and it requires soul, which is something we're trying to fix as well in this discussion. So, one option. What we're trying to do again is draw into pieces. And so that's why I'm presenting these cards here. Now the last card is Gravity Well. Now Gravity Well is really, really good in Messiah. Harmonics Messiah. This helps set up plays so you get those multi-attacks. However, underneath the surface of this card is the fact that you dig really hard with this card. So the way she works is when it attacks, which is awesome. This is not an on-place. When it attacks, Soul Blast 1, discard a card from your hand, look at the top card of your deck, put it on R as locked, and then draw. So you're going to dig 2 cards down with this card and with this card, which is why I presented these like this. This one you're going to get off the top. This one you're going to get off the top. This one and this one, you're actually going to look at the basically look at the top 2. This one, the advantage is you're going to look at the top 2 and be able to decide what you do with them, and you're going to call it. That's why this card is really, really powerful, right? The other one's going to go to the bottom. This card, you actually have to call the card off the top. So if it's got an on-play skill, oh well. If it's edge, if it's clawing edge, you don't care. You're going to put it in the back row. You're going to unlock it at the end of your turn. Hopefully you're not playing against another Chaos Breaker, because they're going to probably nuke that card. But that's the advantage of this card. This card also is basically allowing you to dig down deep, but it's less controlled. Okay, this is a little bit more chaotic, and not in the way we want Chaos Breaker to be chaotic. So, but it is another option because it allows you to dig. It does require soul. She requires soul as well. So there's that. Yeah. So issues with the deck: needs counterblast, needs soul, needs to be able. It's piece reliant. You know, all decks are piece reliant. I mean, when my friend's playing Gurgwit, he gets Percival. That's piece reliant right there. You know, he gets that grade 2 that's really annoying. I forget all the names. The deck's just really, really good. It's also piece reliant. It's a little bit more forgiving. We really need unlockers. Bushi Road, we need more. We need more unlockers. We get one more unlocker, I think the deck will be a bit more consistent. But for now, we have to try to make it more consistent. And with card draw effects, we can potentially do that. So a little bit chaotic. Not sure I would go that route. Definitely can. This card, I like it, and I keep presenting it. I do like it, but again, it nullifies on-place effects. So that's not going to be really helpful for us. Although again, you know, it's something to just consider, but I would take that out for now. These two, out of these two, I'm thinking this, and the reason I like this is if your opponent has like 4 cards in play, you're able to maybe bind one with him and you lock the other one. They now have 2 cards. This becomes really, really easy to do. And say you bind one, you lock one, and all you really need to do now is dig for claw. This is prime real estate, man. This is really good, because you're gonna look at those 2 and you're gonna see what you get, and you know you're digging. It's just like draw triggers. And again, I do stress running draw triggers. Absolutely, running draw triggers. Draw triggers were really helping me. So the likelihood, the probability of this working for you is it's pretty high. Might run 3. Dustblade. Dustblade means that your opponent is now forced to guard the attack that this is boosting versus say something else. If this is on the rearguard circle, or what am I saying? This is always going to be on the rearguard circle unless you've just nulled it as your grade 1 ride. But when it's on the rearguard circle on a rearguard column, your opponent's now forced into the decision of, well, gee, I'm staring down this. My opponent's Vanguard hasn't attacked yet. You don't always have to attack with your Vanguard first, by the way, especially when you've got shenanigans like this. You're going to attack on the rearguard column. Your opponent doesn't guard that. This card does 2 things for you. Bind a card and draw a card. So when it says here, when the attack, it boosts, hits a Vanguard, counterblast 1, choose one of your opponent's rearguards, period. Bind it face down. If your Vanguard's grade 3 or greater, draw a card. This doesn't say draw a card if your opponent's, if the bound card is grade 2 or higher, like this. It doesn't say, you know, like this guy, you only can get soul if it's grade 2 or higher. This can attack the back row, those grade 1s. Okay, so this is really, 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 really good too, because it's allowing us to be more offensive, make something like this card more reasonable to consider keeping in. Yeah, so this, I would definitely use this over him in terms of trying to bind something. It is a counterblast, but you have countercharge. You can always go up to 4 copies if you want to. So I would say both these cards are pretty decent options for this build. Now, likewise, him, and it's an act, same argument. If you've bound a card, you've locked a card, your opponent only has maybe 2, maybe 1 rear guards left, this can go into soul. Now, if you're playing against Aquaforce, whew, that field's going to be pretty perma field. You know, it's going to be out there. So that's when cards like this become even more important, especially something like her, which is one of the things I was thinking about, right? So if you're playing against an opponent who has a massive field, even a Gurgawit player who wasn't able to like bring everything back into hand, this is a 2-for-1, fam. This card is pretty strong. So I wouldn't count it out just yet. But I would say it's gonna need a little bit more help. You know, it's gonna need a little bit more assist than just that. You probably want to be putting this in, and you know, counterblast, lots of counterblasts, right? So yeah. If there are other cards that I'm missing here that people think absolutely should be in this deck, let me know. This is really where I'm at. You're probably saying, well, where are you at? I don't see a deck here. Well, there are a few variations here. I think the crew out there that's filming, that's doing vids, that's running this kind of suite, I think you probably do pretty well. Yeah, it's just going to be trigger checks. Again, running some more draws, I think can be helpful. I'm getting the cat. I ordered Harnoff's cat, and I think using that to go into Soul is something that I'll be doing. I probably run it at like 2 or 3 copies. And then I'm really deciding between here and what I want to do here. So it's kind of do I want to go this route versus this route? I could actually use this with her and him, because, you know, if you bind, this also gets the 10K if you've got 2, right? If you have opponent's card that's locked and your opponent has a card in bind zone, this is getting plus 10. So again, very versatile card. This card, I wanted to say something. So that card, because we only have 1 unlocker, what this card does is it can kind of buy you a turn in a way. So if you've locked a card with the Zirconian and you've locked a card with Chaos Breaker, but you don't have Edge in your hand, this can help you at least lock up circles, whether they're Excel circles or front row, depending on where your opponent put cards. With Zirconia, for example. And I found my friend putting him in the back row because he wants to be able to attack. I get it. You know, you get that plus 10, you draw a card off Zirconia. It's really good. But I totally get it too, because he's able to keep pressuring me. So, yeah, if there are any other draw effects, soul charge effects that are worth considering in the deck, let me know. I tried scanning through our library of cards. Fortunately, it's not as big as Premium. Oh my goodness. So, yeah, I hope you guys have had a great weekend. I know some of you are probably moving already into this next week. Please stay safe, wear your masks, and until next time.